and thank you for coming. And all the paperwork you just received, I'll explain as we go through the presentation. And Morty is in the back here, and Bill is enjoying graduation of his grandson. So, you happy? Yay. Okay. How many people here, by show of hands, have never been in a hurricane? Wow, quite a few. Okay. I hope to scare you enough to follow through on being prepared for this coming season that starts June the 1st. Now, that doesn't mean that you will not hear of a storm between now and June the 1st, because we historically had some earlier than the 1st of June. But generally on the ocean or whatever happens. So I'm going to get started. So, the time has come for you to make a decision. And it's not a difficult decision, at least in my part, for you to be prepared or not. Some people elect not to be concerned because somebody said, we're never going to have another hurricane here. Okay. So you can choose to do nothing. However, before you decide what to do, I'm going to talk a little bit about hurricanes and predictions and all this stuff. And I'm going to talk about these because I want to tear down this concept of, oh, we didn't have a hurricane last year or 5 years ago, or, well, we're only going to have a few coming up. They're predicting next year, just a few or so. I want to tear that all down and make sure that I get that message across that you're going to prepare for it. It's no big deal. And I want to also have you keep in mind that Palm Isles had not been hurricane-free. We've had 8 hurricanes hit Palm Isles and 2 tropical storms. And once again, people shuff off and say, oh, tropical storm, it doesn't mean anything. I want to bring out one case of where it meant something here. Okay, so now we'll talk about hurricanes. What's the structure? You'll hear constantly the eye. Okay, this is basically what a hurricane looks like. This is the eye. Around the eye is a hurricane wall, they refer to. In our hemisphere, the storms are counter-clockwise rotating. The outer bands can reach hundreds of miles. A couple of years ago, Hurricane Irma had 650-mile stretch of the outer bands. Sandy, that hit New York, New Jersey, was almost 1,000 miles. So you can have a hurricane with a couple hundred miles, and you can have a hurricane with hundreds and hundreds of miles. So this is what we're hearing right now. These are the predictions that are coming out for this year. Our historical average is we have 12 storms generally a year. 6 of those become hurricanes, and of these hurricanes, 3 will turn into be major hurricanes. That's with winds of 111 plus miles an hour. Last year, which was really quiet for Palm Isles, but we had 15 storms, 8 hurricanes, and 2 major storms. What's our predictions? Our predictions are basically, we're going to be pretty much on average, maybe slightly higher, maybe slightly low, like 12 here to 13 or so, but here's an outlier, maybe 16. The more important thing, perhaps, hurricane, and you can see will be just around average, and all the major hurricanes about average, maybe slightly under. Okay, so what do these predictions mean to you? Since we can have storms here and there, and they're going to be what I refer to as the Atlantic Basin And the Atlantic Basin is the Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean Sea, and the Gulf of Mexico. And during the hurricane season, first you'll start to see hurricanes coming off of Africa, and then you'll see some forming in the Caribbean, and then perhaps in the Gulf of Mexico. So, generally speaking, I will refer to as the Atlantic Basin when we talk about storms. And we know we hadn't had a storm for a while here. We've had some close ones that came sort of important in the sense that we had Hurricane Irma that was originally heading to our way, but scooted westerly, and we didn't have hardly much of anything there. But we did have one in 2005, and that was Hurricane Wilma, and 10 years after Wilma, we didn't have a hurricane. That's good. So, what are we going to do with these hurricanes, and how are we going to handle these predictions? The experts note that there's no strong correlation between a prediction of hurricanes average 12, let's say to 20, or 6. And it doesn't mean that just a storm is named, and that's when you start off with a depression and then a tropical storm, and they start naming it as such. It doesn't mean that a storm is going to come to Florida, and in particular come into Palm Isles. It may or may not. And there's many examples. We've had years of where we've had very few hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin. But that didn't mean too much in Homestead. In Homestead, in 1992, I think you all are aware of, they got clobbered. Hurricane status 5, which is very heavy rain and so forth. In that year, there were only 6 hurricanes. We can go to the reverse, and we can have years of where many hurricanes were produced in the Atlantic Basin, and none hit Florida. In that particular case over here, we had 2010, there were 19 named storms, 12 hurricanes, and not one hurricane hit the U.S., only one tropical storm. So much for all these predictions. In other words, the season can have many storms, a few storms. We may or may not have a hurricane hit us. I don't know if you're aware that in 2004, Palm Isles was hit with 2 hurricanes, just a few weeks apart. And they landed in the Hutchinson Island area, that's just a little north of us, and the eye hit landfall almost within a mile or 2 from one to the other. And that was in 04, just the year before Wilma. And we did lose power, we did lose some stuff here. And more recently, we're hearing now about storms that are combined with very heavy rains. I'm sure that you recall Hurricane Harvey in Houston, almost 61 inches of rain. And last year, Hurricane Florence in the Carolinas had almost 36 inches of rain. So what does that mean? Not too much, except for if you're in Palm Isles, because we've had storms like that, and I'll get into it. But we're also getting the storm surges. So you're going to hear more and more when they talk about hurricane. Not only the winds, but they're going to talk about surges, because it's becoming more and more important. You all remember Hurricane Sandy. Okay. Palm Isles had a rainstorm in 1999. The hurricane was Irene. Hurricane Irene has been reused several times until it's been retired. You won't never see another Hurricane Irene. I'll talk about retirement of names before. Well, we had almost 20 inches of rain in just a few hours. Some of the lakes were filling up very rapidly, and in fact, if we had another 1 or 2 or 3 inches of rain, some of those houses would have had water in their house. So, there's a point of heavy rains here in Palm Isles. At that time, we had some technical defaults and we fixed that. So that was taken care of. But that's not the whole story. We had Tropical Storm Isaac, 2012, and it had about 15 inches of rain. The problem here is the county was trying to control the level of water in Okeechobee and the canals where we drain into, and the storm came much earlier than they expected, and we got water flowing from the canal into our community, which caused a little bit of flooding down Condo 1 and the entranceway. So, I'm trying to tell you, no matter what you think of, every storm is itself something to deal with. So, do you want to rely upon luck, or are you going to prepare? Keep in mind that we can lose all services, like in Hurricane Wilma. 911 couldn't be reached, no phones, no internets, no TV, nothing. We were pretty much isolated. And you couldn't drive out of the community, all roadways were closed. So being prepared, I think I'm talking to the choir now. I hope so. Because we can lose 911 for more than just a few hours. In fact, the government says be prepared for over 72 hours of no 911 availability. Okay, so here's the thing. Procrastination is not a good option. Time is now. Let's talk about hurricanes and so forth, because you're going to hear constantly, oh, it's a Category 1 or a tropical storm or what. I want to put it in perspective of what you're dealing with here. So we start off with a tropical expression. It does not necessarily have a name. It will probably be assigned a number. And once the winds go above 38 miles an hour, then it becomes a named tropical storm. When you have a tropical storm, don't forget Isaac was a tropical storm. Generally speaking, you'll have minor damage, minimal damage you could expect here, and surges fairly low, 1 to 3 foot surges. Now we go into the hurricane categories, and we have like 1 to 5, and proportionately the winds are here 74 to 95. Expect minimal damage, surge 4 to 5 feet. To 96 to 110 miles. Now we're getting into the heavier stuff, some moderate damages. Generally, we can expect trees, vegetation problems here. If you're in the coastline area, 6 to 8 feet. And you keep on marching down, and like in Andrew, it was 185 miles an hour. You can expect catastrophic damage and greater surge. Last year, Panhandle got a storm that was just recategorized. It was changed from Category 4 to a Category 5 storm. And that's because some of the readings they got from various instruments were recalibrated, and they found that indeed they had some pretty hefty winds there and so forth. So now you're an expert in all these categories and the surges and so forth. So I want to talk about now what can you expect during the course of the season here. Season is June 1st and November 30th, and peak periods are around here August through the end of October. And the bad day is September the 10th. On September the 10th, 97 times out of 100, we've had a storm in the Atlantic Basin. Believe it or not. In fact, if you think in terms of Hurricane Irma, Irma struck the Keys on September the 10th. So, if you're planning to make any trips in the Atlantic Basin area, I would suggest take this plot the curve here, expect storms in that time frame. We have outliers here in May, and we can have little storms here in January. So. Okay, next year you're going to have a bunch of names here, and what they do is they issue 21 names, 8 year and 6 years groupings. In 05, when we had Wilmer, we actually had 28 named storms. So what they ended up with is Greek alphabet, alpha, beta, gamma, and so forth. We had 28 named storms, 15 hurricanes, and 7 major ones. Now, if we have, say, take Jerry. And Jerry happens to be a very extensive storm causing lots of death and damage. That name will be retired and never used again. Katrina will not be used again. Sandy will not be used again. Irene will not be used again, and so forth. There have been many names that have been retired. So now we want to say you're listening to the radio and you're well informed and they talk in terms of a watch, but you hear some areas may have a warning. What's the difference? When they issue a watch, it means get ready. You can expect the hurricane force winds in about 48 hours. Does not necessarily mean it's going to come directly into you, because we know it can veer right, left, or whatever have you. But that's what the watch means, is get ready, expect it, it may be coming. Now they issue a warning, and now they have much more confidence that it's going to come, it's going to hit, and it's going to be about within 36 hours where we're indicated for this particular warning, you can expect that storm to come. They start talking in terms of arrival time. If you recall that picture where the eye, when the eye hits landfall, that's the time they expect they categorize the storm as hitting that area. You can have winds because of the outer bands many hours before the predicted time of arrival. So when a warning comes 36 hours, don't take that as gospel. You may only have 20 hours or 25 hours before storm winds start to hit you. So let's go on to the preparation. You have many options. And the first step you need to take is plan. Plan where you will be for this hurricane that's coming up. You have basically 4 options. One, stay at home. Another one, stay with local family or friends. You can relocate out of the area, or you can go to a shelter, or in some cases, special needs shelter. And I'll be talking about all these shortly. So stay at home. That's the best option, but preferably do not stay alone. Have a friend, or many friends if you like, but make sure if you have friends or family or whatever, you have all the necessary goodies, the water, and we'll talk about this, and the foods and things of this sort, because they may be an unwanted guest after a week or so. If you're going to go to friends or family, you want to make arrangements early on. You're going to say, okay, here's my plan. I'm going to bring my food with me. I'm going to bring special needs equipment, toiletry, whatever it might be that you're planning to take. But keep in mind, the season is June the 1st till November. That friend or family that you're planning to go may have a trip somewhere in the Atlantic, and they might get caught in a hurricane somewhere on September the 10th. Somewhere. So you have to have alternates if you're planning to be with somebody. This is the second best as far as stress is concerned, and hurricanes can be very stressful. You can relocate out of the area. You want to leave early. You want to have all your supplies with you. It may sound silly, but you should have a full tank of gas and a map. And the reason why a map is important is because road construction, highways closed, can happen between point A, your home, and point B, where you want to go. So you want to have a fairly good map in case you have to get off the highway, or the highway gets closed because of some major accident. You want to know where you're going, and if you're going to a motel, hotel, call ahead. Make sure that indeed your reservation is in place, and you want to make sure that if you have a pet, that they will take the pet. This is now getting into much more stressful situations here. Go to a shelter. This is a tough one for people. We're not an evacuated zone, by the way, I didn't mention that before. But the stress level is high. Here's a recent picture of what it looks like. They're basically not controlled by the Red Cross anymore. They're controlled by the staff of the school where the shelter is going to be. And they're not fully trained like Red Cross people, but they do what they can do. You have to bring everything you need for this particular stay. You can see mats on the floor, you can see folding chairs and so forth. So, if you're planning to go to shelter, first make sure that the place you're going is open. They don't open every shelter, they only open for need. If it's a major storm, maybe all shelters will be open, but if it's a semi-major storm, maybe one or two in the local area would be open. And by the way, there's a document you have, what to do. There's some listing of all these shelters, where they are and so forth. Now, Palm Beach County has established if you have a disability situation, they will provide transportation for you to go to the shelter. But you have to sign up, and obviously you have to be eligible. If you have a pet, these shelters will not take a pet, but there are shelters around. The county shelter is on North Tree, right near Vista High School, in the backside of Vista High School area. But you have to sign up early. There's some paperwork you can get on the internet and so forth. You always have to keep in mind identification and your proof of being from Palm Beach County, which is a good thing, is an FP&L bill. The shelters will provide simple meals and beverages, but if you have special dietary needs, you have to bring your own. The shelter will not necessarily provide cots or chairs, and medical care is a Band-Aid. That's about it. Each person has to bring all these various things. Just keep in mind, you're going to a shelter, you have to take a truckload practically. You have to theoretically take a gallon of water per person. You can plan on 3 days stay, so you want at least 3 gallons plus of water. Clothes, you can read it here, old blankets, pillows, chairs. So your truck has to be used and fill up and everything. So it's not a very good option, but it may be necessary for some people. Excuse me. Now, if you have special needs, you speak to your doctor, there's a form to fill out, and the packet, what you got, the forms are there, and basic information. You can have provided transportation from Comtran. Again, you have to sign up early, get on their list. If you're accepted, you need the obvious. You need to prove you're a Palm Beach County resident. If you have a medic alert tag, you should wear it. And you should plan on 5 days stay at special shelters. You need all your personal medications, medical supplies. If you have oxygen, you have to take your oxygen concentrator with you, and so forth. It's no joke. This is real difficult stuff if you plan on going to the shelter. You need to do pre-planning to the nth degree. Even the manual the county puts out, they want you to take a manual can opener. They're assuming you're going to take cans that you might have to open it without a tab and so forth. Yeah. And if you have an aide, the aide has to have all of their own equipment and food and everything. So this is the most stressful situation for a hurricane, is to go to a shelter and special needs shelter. So you got the information here, and if you need more, you can get in touch with Palm Beach County Division of Emergency Management and get more. You have the application there for you to fill out if you need to do that. Okay. Now, whatever option you select, one of the most important things you can do is to make sure that somebody, family friend, preferably out of the area, is designated as your contact and knows where you will be during a storm. Phones are down, phones sometimes spotty. It's better to be able to get one call out than to try to call 50 people and say I'm okay. And I'll talk about that, because if you have a smartphone, there's a good app that you can use to 50 in one time, 1 second. Okay, so you want to inform your contact, and everybody else is going to, if they want to know how you do it, they'll contact your contact first. So you tell them, friend, neighbors, my contact is in New Jersey, telephone number XYZ, or wherever. Now, if you have a device like a smartphone or Google, okay, there was a dog. Okay, there are several apps that you can do. They're free, very easy to download. And if you have, in this case, if you want to use some of these apps, they're fabulous. And I'll go into it here. These are 4 apps that you can get from the Red Cross. This is about a hurricane. We'll briefly talk about tornadoes a little bit. Tornadoes. This is for phones that I highly recommend, and for your pets. Medical aid for your pets. Very easy to download, and you have them, and they're good references. Now, when you're planning to exist without any utilities. So you want the basics. We'll get into some of the items that I consider to be the basics. And you want to have them basically available for all practical purposes now. Doesn't mean for you to run out and get 50 gallons of water, but we'll talk about how much water you should have and so forth, and the scenarios of how much you should have. Okay, so here we are going to talk about that. X number of days of water. The recommended is 1 and a little more gallons per person per day. And also don't forget some of the pets need water as well. What are the X number of days of supply that I'll be talking about? Some few years back, we used to say you should be prepared for 10 days. That would mean if 2 people are in a home, that's 20 plus gallons of water, and so forth and so on. Recently, Publix in particular, but most major stores, have put in generators. So the concept here is if everybody loses their power, they will have power and they can serve their customers with whatever stock they have. The problem there is, number one, the workers have to get to the store, and they may be trapped in an area where they can't drive, or resupply trucks can't get there. And so it's a gambling game of numbers as to how much you should use it. I would recommend somewhere between 3 and 5 days of supply and a little extra because something may not work as well as you had hoped so. So I'll use a round number and I'll take 5 just for sake of argument when I talk about X. You might want to consider various items like the ultra-high temperature pasteurized milk that does not need refrigeration until it's open, some juices and so forth and so on, to complement all the water you're going to have. You're going to have, I'll use the magic day 5 days for food, canned, packaged, bottled, whatever have you, of basically easy stuff to store, and it has good shelf life as such. And don't forget your pet, or pets. You need to have food and water for them too. And you should have medication. Now in Florida, I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's a Florida statute, FS 465.0275. If the governor declares an emergency, you can go to your drugstore and get a refill of your prescription, even if you only use 1 or 2 days of that month's supply or your 10 days of whatever have. So, something to consider as far as prescription medication, medication is concerned. Again, the scenario is drugstores may not be open because people can't get to the drugstores and so forth and so on. So you should be prepared. If you have oxygen, talk to your supplier and get some extra tanks. Because if you lose power, obviously, on your concentrator, you'll be on bottles when necessary during this time. They have special needs to get on the roadway very early after a storm. So highways can be closed, but the oxygen suppliers can actually be out there delivering oxygen. So you need to cover this base. If you're on insulin and your kind that you have needs refrigeration, you may want to consider asking your doctor to have a prescription for insulation that does not require refrigeration. But if your insulin does need insulation, obviously you're going to have, and I'll talk about this, ice cubes and stuff like that very shortly. You want to have a can opener that's manual or battery. Yeah. Flashlights, lanterns, fans. I would recommend having at least 2 to 3 of these fans that are 10, 12, or slightly larger. I know in our case, they were a lifesaver. When you're out and you're trying to sleep and it's hot, they really made a huge difference for us. If you're getting back, and you should get plenty of batteries, and shortly you're going to start seeing people running to places like BJ, Costco, and so forth, buying batteries. They'll start to become a little short. So you may want to put this in your equation of getting supplies. Batteries, top of your list. And if you're wearing hearing aids, you might want to get an extra package, just in case. First aid kit, fire extinguisher, and a whistle. Now, why do I have a whistle here? You have a problem in your home, you're trapped into an area, and you, help, help, kind of quiet. I woke you all up. That's the intent. A whistle is much easier than be yelling, help, help, and people can hear that much. Maybe.
If they didn't, no good.
Cell phone charger, if you have cell phones. Map of the area we talked about. Pet supplies we talked about. Wet wipes, think in terms of you might not be having water either supplied or the water could be bad. So you have to think in terms of both situations. And any special needs that you have extra, because Publix or Winn-Dixie's or those stores may run out and not be supplied for several weeks. If you have a camera or a smartphone that can take pictures, it's a good idea, and I'll talk about that very briefly. Insect repellent, just in case. Plastic sheeting, they're very inexpensive if you get these drop cloths in places like Home Depot or places like that. They're good for protection, I'll talk about shortly. And they're very, I usually keep a dozen of them in my garage, so they're available. Duct tape, you always have to have a roll of duct tape, for whatever reason. You want to get some household bleach, preferably with no additives. And then all the plastic utilities that you plan on using. Trash bags, you may have to wait for the trash pickup for a week or two. So plan on using double plastic bags as a matter of course during the storm and after. You want to perhaps get 1 or 2 gallon size sealable bags, and I'll talk about why the larger ones. Let's see, okay, and okay. So we got all our supplies in the house. Now, what are we going to do with these supplies, and how are we going to prepare beyond just having the stuff in the house now? First thing is always you're going to keep informed. You're going to have normal, no problems, your TV, your radio. If we lose power, you have radio, and if you would like, you can get these small portable TVs, about 4 or 5 inch screen or something, but they should be digitized, no more analog. TVs work here. And fill your gas tank as soon as you can. Don't wait for the day or two before, because the line gets kind of large or they run out of gas. If you're planning to do barbecuing, fill your tank up. Always store it in a safe place. And I'm going to use the word, you've heard this word now very recently, shall. The legal word barbecue shall only be used outside. If you want to die, that's the quick way to do it, is barbecue in your house. If you have hurricanes, now we're talking just early on in the storm, there are some usually hurricane shutters that takes a little bit of that effort. Those are the ones you want to close first. So you close those up. Now you start freezing water bottles and make as many ice cubes as you can, but put them in double plastic bags. Gallon size would be good. 2 gallon size is a little bit difficult to handle, but there's a place for that to be in your storage of food, in your box here. And don't forget, it does take time to make ice. It's not as if you put ice cubes, you make ice cubes and you have it instantaneously. So plan on making ice cubes. You want to go outside, make sure you have nothing that's going to fly. And if If you look around the community, I'm sure you will find plenty of stuff that could fly, and hopefully they're not there during the storm. You want to have plenty of cash, because when you're able to get out, you may find places that cannot use cards. Their telephone lines are closed or whatever. So cash low denominations are very handy. You want to take pictures of your home, and what I would do is I would take that day's newspaper, just as proof that that's the day I took all the pictures of all the stuff that's of value in the house. You want to take the larger bags now, the two-gallon bags, and any papers that you feel are valuable for one reason or another, put them in these bags. You can double it up and close them. And they can be stored in some safe places, like in your linen closet on the top shelf. There's usually a well-protected area that will survive just about everything. Or you can go into your dishwasher or your clothes washer, put the stuff in, close the door, and they'll keep them fairly safe there. When you have a hurricane warning now you have 36 hours or less, generally it's less, you start to get a little bit more concerned. Find out what's going on, fully charge your cell phones. Now start closing more shutters, perhaps leaving just your front door shutter open at this point. Now you want to turn your refrigerator and freezer to the coldest setting, because you want to get everything as cold as possible. It's a little plus. It's not a huge amount, but it's a little plus. If you're planning to stay with somebody, which we talked about, then you want to call, verify that indeed they're here, they're wherever they are, and they still want you to come. And if you're traveling any distance, and any distance can be 15, 20 miles, you can have difficulty because people are starting to go to shelters, they're going out of the area. Some years back, many areas had thousands of people going to Orlando because a hurricane was coming in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. And what happened? It skirted around and it came right into Orlando. So, go on. Now, just before the hurricanes hit, and again, think in terms of the outer bands, not necessarily where the eye is located. As I mentioned down here. Get all your equipment ready now. You have everything there. You have your lanterns out. You have your batteries in your lanterns or your flashlights. You have your freezer going full steam. You might want to even consider cooking a little food at that time. You might want to sterilize your bathtub. This is where the bleach comes in.
How do you do that? How do you sterilize a bathtub?
How do you sterilize?
Sterilize a bathtub is simply you take some bleach and you swash some bleach around. This is not going to be for drinking purposes. This is going to be for flushing toilet purposes and so forth. And if you're concerned about the stop may leak a little bit, take a sheet of that drop cloth and put it down there, and the pressure of the water will seal it totally. So you have a bathtub, and this is where you can get water when you need it. The worst assumption could be, the worst case, no water or contaminated water or whatever happened. Now you want to secure all your shutters because you're now preparing to be buttoned in.
What if you don't have shutters?
You take all these other precautions. Secure all your windows and close all your drapes. Do not use duct tape on windows. The reason being is that if duct tape is on a window and it is broken by hurricane forces, you have very large dagger-type sheets of glass flying around. So you do not want to tape windows.
questions?
Please, why don't you hold all this, because I might answer a lot of your questions, and then I can answer it later. You want to, as I mentioned, secure your windows, close all your drapes, close all your doors, and if you're expecting a major storm, and they'll tell you that, you may want to consider, if you can, move the furniture a little bit away from the window. You may want to take a drop cloth or so and put it over the furniture. You may want to take a towel and put it on the windowsill. All precaution. Now, what you want to do is you want to turn off your freezer. And take all those ice cubes and put them in plastic bags. And the question was raised why, which I'm going to mention. Here's what happens.
Oh, yeah.
Power's off. You lose your power. Ice cubes melt. In where? And the whole refrigerator running down. You have a mess. It's all over everything that you have in there. So do not have ice cubes in these little buckets and such. Even if you're leaving your home, going to your friend's house, you want to turn off and do the same thing with your freezer. Major storm coming, consider unplugging your computer, electronic equipment, and possibly even cover them with these drop cloths. I recommend that you unplug all small appliances. Lightning, sometimes around, they run down wires and so forth, so just unplug them. Deactivate your alarm system. You don't need the alarm system ringing like crazy because the winds start rattling your doors and your windows, whatever have you, and nobody's going to come anyways. So deactivate your alarm. And obviously, don't go out. Always keep informed. Do not use an elevator if you have an elevator. Keep all your interior doors closed. And if by chance you have power and it goes off and then it comes on again, I recommend that you turn both your refrigerator freezers off as well as your hot water tank. The reason being is they both consume a lot of power, and so you get this surge. Every time the power flickers, you get partial voltage or extreme high voltages coming through your home, and they are very vulnerable with these surge problems. So I'm not going to help you any if it's flickering on and off anyway, so you may as well save your compressor. Hot water tank. Mainly because of the surge problem. If everybody does it, then the voltage surge is by far better than you would have with all of them on the side. Now, generally speaking, I recommend that you turn off most of the lights, and the reason, again, is voltage surges and things of this sort. Keep on a lamp, at least a light bulb, for two reasons, and if you can, have a conventional light bulb in there, filament type of bulb. The reason being is they're kind of hardy and they don't necessarily go bad with voltage surges and all. But it also will tell you when you have power off, obviously, and it'll also tell you when you have power on, because the light will come on. So it's good to keep at least one on all the time, even if you don't have power. Never use candles. I've heard people say, oh, but never use candles because scenario can be something goes flying through, comes in through a window, shutter or not, there's gust of wind, knocks the candle down, drape, fire, you're in trouble. 911 is not available. Now, if you feel that something is really going to happen, your house is in trouble, you want to go into your safe area. Your safe area is where preferably no windows, and in most homes there's like one master closet, and some of those closets have an opening to the attic. You want to have those secured so that they don't get sucked up. When you go in, you want to take some supplies with you, take some sofa pillows or something for this, because you're in fear of your life, you want to protect your head, so at best you can put something over your head, and you'll know when to do it. The sound gets kind of wicked. After the storm, you always want to make sure, now I know there's a slide somewhere, that the storm is really over. Hurricane Wilma came by, we were in the eye for a considerable period of time. Calm, like there was nothing going on. The wind was initially coming from the south towards our area. The eye passed silent, the backside of the hurricane came and it was coming from the northern direction. Complete reversal of the wind. And if somebody said, oh, okay, hurricane's over, I'm going out and play tennis or something, they're going to get caught and get hurt. Now, if your phones are working, fine, make minimum number of calls and call your contact. Let them know all is well, and everybody should call your contact wherever they may be. Keep the lines as useful as possible. And if you have this app, the app is relatively simple. You can pre-set it up, and you have all the phone numbers that you want to contact. Mary in Chicago and Charlie over here and so forth. And to my knowledge, I don't think it's limited. I had about 50 on. I would type my message, all is okay, press a button, all 50 of them went out instantaneously. So everybody got a text message, and text messages have more capability of being sent than a voice message. The phone may not be working for voice, but it may send text messages. So you have a much better shot at that. Obviously, you open a minimum number of times, you freeze your door, and that's where you use the box sometimes. When in doubt, throw it out. Food or water. Water can go bad. So be careful. And don't call the utilities, you don't have power. You know they know. Whenever you exit your home, you have to be very careful. You can have loose tiles, or in fact, some very friendly alligators out there. So you need to be very careful when you're going out. And if one doorway is closed because of a tree, or a palm or whatever, use another door. Don't move it. Management people will take care of that as soon as possible. If you have a generator, never run it anywhere near your windows, even your eaves. Because the eaves have openings that will suck up the exhaust, carbon monoxide, and you will have carbon monoxide in your home. If you have lost power, you want to open your garage, now you know what that red handle is for. You just pull it, it releases the door, and you can physically, and I know some people have trouble with it because of the weight, but you can lift the garage door. Pull the red handle down. And always keep informed, and don't leave until you know that the storm is over, which I just talked about. Stay alert, whatever have you, drive only necessary. And this is not the worst intersection, but this is the only picture I can get that's somewhat relevant for us here in the general area. You want to inspect your home after the storm is over. If you see damage, take some pictures of it. And again, do not use candles. I can't overemphasize that because I know people, oh, I have a little candle here, it's in a glass container, it's safe, but it's really not. Don't take a chance. Avoid drinking or preparing food with tap water unless you know it's good. That's where the extra water comes into play. So the 1+ gallons per person comes into play here. And anytime you have a slight inkling it doesn't smell right, throw it in double plastic bags. And use the phone system minimum, and as I mentioned, inform your people, your friends, family. Now we have another item, value of life. You've got a handout. It's a sheet, two-sided. And I'm going to read this because it's fairly important what it says. The vial of life is designated to speak to you when you can't speak for yourself. The vial contains important medical information that can assist emergency personnel in administering the proper medical treatment. If you're in trouble, you're on the floor, you can't speak. 911 people come in, they'll say, are you okay? You can't talk. Do you have heart condition? They can't answer. But that sheet will talk for you. It will tell them all the necessary, give them all the necessary information. You're protecting yourself, your family. It doesn't take that much time to fill them out. And you want to put these in a plastic baggie, again, protected from water, things of this sort. And all the time in the home, it's a good idea to have them in a visible place. At one time, it was always like on a refrigerator, but some of these stainless steel refrigerators, the magnets don't work too well, so find some place you can just put it so it can be found. The document, what to do, 21 pages. Take your time, read it, because there's a lot of good hints about how to take care of yourself or what you should do. And in particular, there's a section, if you happen to have somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's, there are hints there as to what you can do above and beyond. So it's in there as well. The information on the shelters are there. Some information on the pet shelters are in there as well. We also have some gas stations that have generators. There's some information there on the gas stations that have generators. So there's a whole host of information that's in there. It's a little bit tough reading. There's a lot of information there, but take your time to please look at it. Now, we're recording this presentation, and we plan on having this on channel 63 shortly. It will be on a scheduled basis on 63, but the format will eventually, in short order, be available on demand. If our website is up, we would have it on the website. If not, we will have it available on YouTube. So it will be available for further reference if you would like. Pyrex will notify you when it's available. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I hope thank you both for your questions. And if you don't have shutters, you do the best you can. As I mentioned previously, you close your windows, secure them, draw the drapes, close your doors, and be as far away from windows as possible. That's the culprit, the windows. Yeah, any questions?
After it's all over, about an hour after the hurricane, you will see certain people walking around with vests, yellow vests. So if you have any problems, they will be able to handle it for you. They will be out there, and if anybody wants to be a search person, a volunteer, we would love to have you, because we do need you. You go through a nice course, 8 hours,
24 hours.
24 hours, and you learn how to take care of yourself, And then when you're okay, you come down and help your neighbor, because we do have a lot of elderly people who can use our help. And if somebody's hurt, we'll take care of them, give them first aid. So if you're interested in becoming a CERT person, please let us know, or let Arthur know, and we'll be glad to handle it for you.
On that point, there are 3 classes being posted very shortly. They're very intense. You're going to cram in 24 hours of classes in 4 days. It's recognizable that it's tough. But if you have the interest, let me know, and I will try to sign you up to get in these classes.
Yeah, very good, very interesting.
The county miraculously got some funding just recently to have 3 additional classes. I don't have the schedule or what they plan on doing there. We were hoping to have one here, but we didn't have any volunteers.
Let me explain something. What I just relayed to you all, it does happen. If you were here during Wilma, it does happen. We had a woman get hurt, we had 2 elderly people, the patio door flew in on them, they called 911, 911 does not come. You gotta remember, you got a firehouse over here with maybe 7 guys working. So you think 7 guys can take care of 35,000 people around here? No. So you might not see them for a few days. So what he's telling you, do. It doesn't happen to the other fella. It can happen to you. It's very, very important. And we did have a lot of damage here. And I told you about puddles, which you walk outside. I remember the instructor said, the dog was in the puddle, the child went after the dog, and the mother went after the child, and it was an electric line was in it. True story. So you've got to be very careful. It does not happen